it looks like it's recording. So, hello everybody. Thank you for making the trek over here. The talk is called The Slice Template. And we're going to talk about design development and content creation for the Slice template. So my name is nicalorber. I've been working in Drupal doing design and strategy since 2003.
I'm Zakiya Khabir. I work at Chapter 3, and I've been doing Drupal development since 2007.
So I just want to talk a little bit about what the Slice template is. This is just a term that I made up to describe the design systems for creating landing pages with modular layouts. So you guys might be wondering, what do I mean by modular layouts? And what I mean, this is a pattern that you've seen before on lots of websites, where websites use color, columns, and layout differentiation to create these slices that create these landing pages. And you guys have seen this like on tons of websites. And this design system has become popular for a lot of reasons. And it's because with responsive design, this pattern is, it's sort of like it's proven and it works. From a content creation standpoint, these slices do a really good job at chunking content. So when somebody comes to a landing page, they can easily scan the page when you have slices that are differentiated by color and columns and so forth. And the other reason that this has become popular is because it's cheap. And when I say cheap, I mean that with responsive design, creating websites is a little bit more expensive, and so certain things are more difficult to create and design than others, and all of these patterns have been vetted, proven, and are effective in what they set out to do. And so that's kind of the context that I'm saying cheap. I just mean that it's kind of like, we already know these things are going to work, and so they've become really popular. And the other thing about these patterns is, most importantly, they empower marketers to quickly and cheaply change their websites. So, if somebody builds a website and they have these landing pages, they have to change those landing pages really frequently. And in the past, a lot of times you would have to work with a developer and a designer and a content creator, to both create the content and program the page. But now with Drupal, and especially with Drupal 8, they can do this really easily. And so I just want to also give you guys a little bit of history on this. So I've been doing this, I've been doing this for this pattern for many, many years. And I'd say that when we started creating it initially, we were successful at delivering the design solution and implementing it on the back end. But I would say that in the beginning it was quite an unpleasant authoring experience. Like I always try to go in there and author the websites to see how it feels for the client. And with Drupal 8, I went in and I'd say in the last year with a few sites that we've built, and I was playing around with building the Slice template, and I literally shrieked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is it's quick, it's easy. So I feel like we've sort of arrived with Drupal in this particular pattern. And the other thing is that we've created this so many times that I've started to define certain patterns that are applicable for pretty much any average website. So I want to just talk about what typical slices I'll add on any website. So we'll have a one-column slice, which this is really good for when you have a lot of long-form content. You'll have a slice with image left, text right. And on all of these slices, we build them so that the administrator can change the background color. And those colors will be determined in the design phase, but they have that option. So you'll see, for instance, a lot of sites that will have this pattern followed by this pattern, where it's the same pattern but flipped. And then if you just kind of repeat that pattern down the page, what it allows a reader to do is allows their eye to do this zigzag pattern, which is really good for scanning a page. 3-column layout, this is very common. And you'll notice here that I have these things that say optional title, optional subtitle, and these things. Those are some of the nuances that I've added over time as we've worked on projects together and realized that those are just little details that the clients look for. So these kind of become almost like the default things we add in where even if they don't ask for them, we're like, you'll ask for them eventually. Same kind of pattern, but with 4 columns. This is one called a featured content slice. So in the event that someone has like 5 pieces of content or just 1 piece of content, this is just an alternate layout where you can feature, a type of content, and again with an optional title and subtitle. An FAQ slice, this is something that is not used super commonly, but as you're building out pages, you can have this contextually when relevant, where you need to add like FAQ content to pages. If you guys want, there's tons of seats over here, so you guys don't have to
And in the front.
lurk in the back. Another really common slice, especially with any product site or site where you're trying to cultivate trust, is a testimonial slice. And this can have a couple variations. If you add arrows to it, it can also be like a testimonial carousel. It's super common. Or like an optional CTA slice. So that gives you guys a little bit of an overview of what the slice template is. And again, you guys might call this something else. This is just a term that I coined and we started using internally at Chapter 3. But it's catchy. A lot of people started using it. So that gives you an overview of what it is. Do you guys have any questions before we move into the development piece? And then we're going to come back to the content curation piece. Great. All right. Oh, sorry. I have one more slide. I forgot. This kind of shows you like what a page would look like when you have all of these slices put together. And as I mentioned before, the way that this template works is you can mix and match these in any style. I will say that you want to make sure that you change the background color with each slice so that you create that slice effect. Otherwise, it just kind of looks like it all blends together. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Zakiya.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the build, your build options. I'm not going to go in a lot of details. I'm just going to give you enough to like give you a sense, and then you can take that information back to wherever you work and whatever you're working on. So there's 2 main modules that, or 2 sort of parent modules that you can use to build the slice template. And I think most people are probably familiar with paragraphs. How many people have used paragraphs before? Okay, cool. And how many people have used ECK and like inline entity form? Much smaller number. So I'm not going to preach one or the other. I'm just going to give you like what sort of why we use some in some cases and why we would use the other in the other. If you're going to use paragraph, then entity reference revisions is a dependency, so you're going to have to use that. I recommend if you use either one, you're going to want to use entity clone module, because that makes it really easy to take an existing node, an existing page, copy all the paragraphs from the previous one and put them into the next one. And it works great with either one of these. If you're going to use ECK, which stands for Entity Construction Kit, then you want to use inline entity form, which affects the admin side of that, and you'll also you might want to take a look at inline entity form preview, because it can also like modify that admin experience as well. Again, I'm just putting this out there for reference. Like in the slides, you'll be able to download the slides and see more. And then just for getting us all on the same terminology, so what's an entity? In Drupal, things called nodes, users, taxonomy terms, views. In Drupal 8, views are an entity. They're not in 7. Forms, comments, files, these are all examples of entities. And then the actual definition, which I stole from Derek Reese from the Media Current blog, is they're objects in Drupal that have an ID, a language, a type, and a storage. So, and then a paragraph is a specific kind of entity, and an ECK entity is a specific type of entity produced by their relative modules. So is anyone confused about when I say the word entity, does everyone have a general idea of what I'm talking about? Like, okay, cool. Yeah, and this is just more of describing it, like, so that you can, what are the comparative things? So a node is an entity with a bundle type called content type, ECK entity is a bundle type, which could be called hero slice or whatever you decide to name it. And then the paragraph type would be the bundle. So why are there two different approaches? Like, why is there something besides paragraph that even exists? I think the general overview is that paragraphs was designed with site builders in mind. And I think it makes it a lot easier for the site builder to like sort of come in, know what's happening, and use the system however they want. ECK, I think, is more developer-centric for people who want sort of like a baseline set of tools that they can manipulate in a lot of different ways, and not necessarily to build something like the slice template. ECK can be used to build a variety of things in Drupal, even other sort of systems like taxonomies, if you get into the development part. But our primary use case for it has been to build these things that are paragraph-like. Their similarities are many. The multilingual support. I just put a little like thing down here just so you know that there's, it's not really a caveat, but you should be aware of, it's not a limitation, it's just like a peculiarity with paragraphs and multilingual support. You can put fields on either so that, you know, they can have images, they can have text boxes, they can be, you can add views to them, etc. Themable in exactly the same way. Searchable, like they both work with the search API in the same way in Drupal 8. And you can also have permissions by type, like so you can say, well, these kind of users can't edit one column slice, but they can edit two column slice. Bad use case, but you get my point. The site builder experience. So I just put this in because, so some people might have seen I wrote a blog post about ECK versus paragraphs. It's kind of like how I ended up part of this. And one of the big requests was that we show how you set up the paragraphs and ECK. So I just put in videos of each in here so that you can sort of just like follow it and download it on your own and, you know, sort of figure out how to like build these different things. In general, paragraphs is much easier for novices to set up. There's less like having to figure out like what's a bundle, what's a type, what's, you know, like what am I going to name these things. Paragraphs sort of like, because it has this very specific use case, it sort of like fills in the blanks a little bit for you. And there's even a, I forget the name of the module, but a module that has pre-built paragraphs or slices.
Yeah, paragraph bundle. I think.
Paragraph bundle. And then the site builder experience for ECK is a little more complicated. I think it requires a little more, I would recommend if you've never used it before, play around with it a little bit so you can kind of understand the relationship between the bundle and the paragraph, the bundle and the entity, and what you're building. This video will also show you like the basics of just setting it up for like a hero slice, you know, how you would make that big banner one. The content editing experience. These images are kind of small, but in paragraphs, they have choices for how you display the form. You can kind of tell that, like, in the closed form, they're just like single line, like this would be the hero, the 2 column, the 1 column, and it's very collapsed and not very overwhelming. You just open the piece that you want when you want to edit it. They have a preview one where you get like a sense of like what do all, what's it going to look like when it's actually, it better mirrors what it's going to look like for the on the front end, and you can configure this just like you would configure any other display in Drupal. And then the fully open, which I think is less desirable because it's very like you can imagine with a really long page it's just going to be forever and no one likes that. With ECK, you can also configure a variety of experiences, and you can almost make them look identical, right? So if you use inline entity form preview, you can do the same sort of like thing as you would with the paragraphs preview, or you could have them start all collapse and not even use the preview module. Revisions. So paragraphs has revisions built in. It depends on revisions, so you will absolutely have revisions with paragraphs. One thing you should be aware of though is like say I have my testimonial, and I've only changed my testimonial, you're not getting a revision of that testimonial. It's a revision of the entire node that contains that testimonial. There are no revisions with ECK unless you want to keep working on the module. There's definitely work in that being done in that space. This is the kind of thing that can be a deal breaker between one or the other. And this is something very important to know if you're going to propose one or the other as a system, is that you won't get revisions, at least the way that clients expect revisions to work, if you use ECK. But you do get reusable entities, right? So Paragraphs does not have a way for you to reuse that individual. Say I have this one testimonial that was written, maybe I need it on 16 pages. You're going to have to either clone the whole page to get that testimonial over and over again, and you'll get a different instance each time, or you'll just copy and paste it. But when you use ECK, so this is a site that's actually, we both worked on. This same, you can't really see because low resolution, but this same slice right here, which is the contact information for the organization, is used in 2 different nodes, and referenced exactly the same way on the admin side. And if I wanted to add it to another page, it would just be in my choice of existing ECK or entities, whatever I call them. I call them slices. So it'd be there's a button that says add existing slice, and they could just add one that already exists.
So if we change it in one place, it would change in all the other places?
All the places, yeah. Naming is really important if you do something like that. Teaching your clients how to name things properly is important if you go this way. There's just a small thing to know. You do get a unique URL for each ECK entity. I haven't really found where that's really needed, But if it is important to you for any reason, if it ever comes up, that's just something to know. And you don't get that with Paragraphs. And then this last of my slides just gives you a summary. Again, this is for reference of what each one provides, and so you can make those decisions on your own. One thing I didn't mention a lot of is the flexibility with ECK. So in that site that I was showing, for instance, the slice that has the horizontal pieces that are calls to action, those calls to action are actually a different entity type. And so I built those also using ECK. So I'm leveraging ECK not just for the slice, the big piece, but for the things that are inside the slice. And so that's why I think, at least at chapter 3, I think we've almost always go with ECK because the designs we're working with or the project is requiring that we need something else. We're going to have to use entities anyway. We might as well use both if revisions isn't something that's required of the project.
Well, didn't we talk about how it was more extendable or something like that? If you're building a site and long term, you're sort of evolving it and adding more slices and that stuff. Did I have that right?
Right. So if down the line they're still in that sort of realm of understanding that they have these pieces and they can add the pieces to the smaller piece. I call them chunks. So I have in my UI, it's the slices and then chunks, and chunks go into slices. So if they're going to need more and more types of chunks later on down the line, then that's where ECK could be a benefit. And then the last thing I'll mention is developer support. The hands that were raised of using Paragraphs. That's why Paragraphs stays mature, and that's why you can get a lot of help with Paragraphs, and that's why there's a model to extend Paragraphs. Whereas with ECK, because it is more developer toolbox kind of realm, it's a little harder. If you get stuck for some reason to find quickly Google how would you solve this problem, yeah.
With either one of these, how are you handling the built-in title and body fields? Do you ditch those or use the title field?
I prefer to create a high title checkbox on them, a field called high title, and then in my template I say if hide title is not checked or whatever the code is for that, then show it. Yeah.
So client has the option to,
Hide or show.
okay, what if they want that title to be like below, say like a hero image or something like that? Is that?
So that with both of these systems, you have to sort of work with the client to decide how extensible do you want them to be, right? So you can make it so that they can change the background color to any color in the rainbow, or you can give them 3 colors. You can say that like you can get a choice between image left and image right, or maybe there's like 5 options with the image. And same with the title. Like you could say, do you want title on top, title bottom, or title hidden? And you can give them that option, but they sort of have to they have to agree in advance what those are going to be, or else you're just going to blow your budget with their like, we've decided a new thing, like we got to add it to all the things now. So yeah.
And it can also make the user experience more complicated, which is like the third piece that we'll talk about here, which is that when you're in strategy, if you ask the client, hey, do you want all the flexibility in the world, they'll almost always say yes. And what I've learned over time is to really like say, look, I know you say you want this, but you don't. Like, because people think they do, but then when it's kind of like the paralysis of choice. They can't remember what it does, or like they end up usually not using it in the end because they forget that they even have that much power or control. Or
Phase 2.
And what about reusable entities? How much of a, I mean, I know it probably depends on the particular client, but
How?
Because it seems to be kind of a drawback with paragraphs, but there's so much more widely used. Does that get to be a problem? Like, would you say a majority of your clients want the reusable entities or not?
They want it, but I also feel like if we had said no, they would have just been like, okay. So like they definitely want, and I used to try to limit the types of slices that you would add to certain content types to make it like a cleaner experience. Basically, they want to be able to add every slice to every node, and you shouldn't. And even though it's like, oh, I'm cleaning it up for you, they kind of want it all. And with that, that's an easy change that doesn't, like, if you're using ECK, making them have the ability to add any slice to any page is easy enough to do. So, yeah.
And the other piece to that is, in my experience, what I've found are the most, the most common, reusable entity I would see on any page, and it would be like a global CTA. So let's just say at the bottom of the footer, you're just like, oh, and here's our global CTA. But you can work around that. It doesn't have to be a slice. Like before we got to this point, we built a lot of sites where it was just a checkbox where it says show or hide that CTA on any given page.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, basically off that same line of thought, is the ECK is more about I want to reuse the same piece of content, like it says foo, and I want it to say foo on all my pages, or is it like paragraphs is more like I want to reuse the same form. I want to be able to have a CTA, but over here says foo and here says bar. Is it really about the content itself?
I mean, so if you're using paragraphs and you actually had a form that you wanted to see on every page, or a CTA you wanted to see on every page, I would probably just use a block or something else, The benefit of doing it in the ECK system is that it's not a new thing that they have to learn. So like I don't have to teach them the block overview page and the ECK system. It's all in that sort of thing, that's list of things
But
that
are
they
they
want.
actually calling the same piece of content over and over again?
If you use in paragraphs, if you use blocks, you'd be using the same piece of content over and over again.
But not with ECK?
With ECK, you are using the exact same piece of content over and over again. Yes,
okay.
the exact same thing that you create, the exact same entity.
Okay.
So I guess what I'm saying is that, like, if you know that seriously, like, the same piece is going to be used almost on every page, it's not like there isn't a way around that with paragraphs. It's just, I think the ECK way is a little more elegant.
But you'd have to type it in every single page. You'd have to say, call now. Every time you call up the CTA paragraph, you'd have to type it in.
Yeah. If you made it in paragraphs.
Right.
But if you're using paragraph, you could also say, I'm going to create a block. Like
Sure.
use
But you
use
have
a,
to do another way around.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. You'd have to learn another system. Yeah. So, any more questions?
Tag. All right. So this is something I'm very passionate about, which is content creation, because this is in our industry where I think the most, where we still need the most work. So I want to ask you guys, this is not nothing I'm showing you guys that we're showing you is like a brand new idea. It's more just like, this is what we call it and this is how we do it. How many of you guys have created a solution like this and found your clients struggling to create the content for it? That's, okay, a good number of you. So me too. And I want to talk a little bit about sort of where the struggles are and how we've tried to help some of our clients. So I want to talk a little bit about like where we start today with this. So when we create something like the slice template, someone comes to us and they say, Zakiya, Nika, here's some money. Design, strategize, and build. And we're like, there you go. We delivered it. You guys now have this amazing tool. You're super empowered. You know, you have it's like something that will save you money down the road. It's a great thing. And so we feel like we can pat ourselves on the back. We did a good job. And we're like, it's great, you know? But the reality is that when you deliver this to the client, the slice template is hard. And why is it hard? It's hard because let's think about history. There was a time when, you know, you create a website and the most you ever ask a client to do is add some text and an image. It's like one field. And even that, they're like, screw, you know, it's like, depending on their level of expertise, they can screw up. So now what are we asking them to do? We are asking them to pick colors, pick their images, pick a layout, strategize about the order, you know, like, we're asking them to be designers, and it's a lot. Like, this is what I eat, sleep, and breathe. So for me, I'm like, it's so easy. Like, duh, you know, you can think about this. But I'm going to tell you guys, like, I did this project recently, this one that Zakiya and I worked on, and this was a super cool project because we also got hired to help the client with some of the content. And so we had this project manager who was also a writer and a developer. So here's this person, Drupal developer, PM, writer, superstar. She understands the internet. And she went to start creating content for the slice template and got confused. I was like, how can you be confused? I'm like, you know everything.
Yeah. And if you're confused.
Right? And so it really was like an aha moment for me. But not to be so doom and gloom, I think that the real story here is that it is hard at first, but over time, it's absolutely overcomeable. So the same client who I would say is like a dream client, they had all the qualities that you look for in a client. They had an open mind, a willingness to do their part in the website, a great attitude, you know, they were awesome. And we really tried to set these guys up for success. And so I interviewed them kind of after they'd been using it for a while, and I said, hey, tell me, like, how has this been for you? And she said, you know what? It took me 3 weeks to, like, really play around with the slice template to truly get it. But then once I got it, it went really quickly, and I was like, wow. I'm like, that's powerful. That's, like, a really great thing to know, because she was completely on board. And as all you guys know, that's rare. A lot of times a client is under the gun. They're under-resourced, you know, they're just trying to, like, get something out, and they don't have that sort of groovy mindset of, like, yes, I'm going to learn this thing. This is, like, this thing I paid for. So this is a huge takeaway. If you take away anything from this talk, if you guys find yourselves in these situations, like, we can help by being like, hey, guys, from day one, you guys need to give yourself this much time to really get the most out of this amazing tool that we're building for you. Because otherwise, it's like, you're basically just taking that investment and it's going down the drain. And so I think that we as the practitioners are part of the solution, and there's a great, we can help, there's ways to solve this, and it's really through training, documentation, and setting expectations. So I want to share a couple scenarios that I've seen happen and where things have gone wrong, and talk a little bit about what we did to fix it. And this isn't like a one-size-fits-all solution, but of all the things that I saw my clients struggling with, it really boiled down to 3 things, is that they had insufficient training, so whether that was like the type of training, the quantity, or the style wasn't enough. Same thing with documentation. It's not that we didn't give them documentation, it's just that maybe it wasn't in the format or like the robustness that they needed for their team makeup. And then resourcing can be on many levels. It could be that like they didn't pay us enough money to make good documentation, which is totally possible because that, as you guys probably all know, is super time consuming to do right. And it could also be on their end where they just didn't allocate enough time to, you know, do the content. So here's one scenario. So one of my clients was an international corporation. They were a large corporation where they had, you know, we had their point of contact. We built the website for them. Their boss then was kind of like the site owner, but then there were these international instances of the company all over the world, and in each of those little locations, you had someone who's a pointer, meaning someone's like, oh, I'm not touching the website, I'm hiring this agency to do it. So let's think about that. You have someone who's like 3 steps removed from like the strategy process. It's like we worked with them directly, we built the website, we have a point of contact there who understands the site, but the people who are creating the content are 3 steps removed. And we did create documentation for them, but it wasn't enough, clearly. And like, again, I interviewed them for this talk because I was like, where are things going wrong? Like, how can we get better at this? So the cool part was we had a long-term relationship with these guys. So over time, we're like, what can we do to set you guys up for success? So the better documentation looked like this. It included content strategy, meaning within the template itself, it explains like, what is this template for? How you're supposed to use it? Like, kind of mapping like the business strategy and the communication strategy with what the template is. The second one, where's my pointer?
Oh no! So I can't get it.
That's okay.
I think it's in here.
The second one, I was very excited about that little thing, is the examples. Sorry. That's okay. Having real world examples of the template. So you have that slice template and it's almost like, thanks, Zakiya. I think this makes talks a lot better. So
And cats have.
you guys don't know what I'm talking about. If you have examples, this is really critical. So you basically say, hey guys, here's your real content, here's how I would like do this for you, and you have the content. And then you also show them how to do it wrong. Like, hey, don't use all the same colors, or don't make the like image juxtaposed against this like Mongo text. And so you really have to show them, and making it visual makes them immediately get it. So yeah, so the do's and the don'ts. And then the image guidelines, this is stuff we had already given them, but I'm just reiterating, you want to put like, you know, the sizes, the brand usage, you know, things like that. Same things with text. And then I'm just kind of calling this out here because that was this particular project. Like, the big question the client had was, where can I use video? Because like to us, we're like, you use it everywhere, it's so obvious, you know, but it's kind of not. Like, it depends on like, well, can I use it in this thumbnail? Is it here? Like, what kind of video? So just, again, I think we have a lot of internal knowledge that we think is obvious, and just really making it visual for the client. So what this I'm sorry, you guys, you can't really see this. This is supposed to be a slice template here, and these are kind of like, I put names next to what each slice was. Oh, it's still kind of hard to see. Yeah, sorry, guys. If you guys look at the slides later, you'll be able to see it. So what I did was I kind of named each slice, right? So you start there, so that creates like a language. Everyone understands what you're saying when you're calling a slice a name. And then slice by slice, pretend that there's a square here, not just like a white phantom. I would talk about like, okay, like what's the structure of this? And so you talk about like the image dimensions, you know, the height can vary, talk about it responsibly. And so this is like the structural guidelines. And then I would talk about the kind of like the content guidelines. So I'd be like, hey, this is what you use it for, blah, blah, blah. And then I would follow with do's and don'ts. So I did that for like every single slice. And as you guys might be thinking, like if there's dollar signs going off in your head, the answer is yes. Like, this stuff takes a long time. So it's almost like a separate project that you would have to get the client to buy into. I mean, it's not like forever, but this thing probably took me 40 hours. Like, it's not some just like easy task. This is kind of a side one. So I've been really like passionate about this. I've been trying to solve it in a lot of ways. This is another thing I did for YMCA. So what I did with these guys, and this was sort of like a real epiphany, was that I was like, hey, why don't we put the slice next to the actual Drupal admin piece? So here's the little guy, right? I put right on the image like what this is, like the image size, and then I say, hey, this is the text. Don't make it more than 180 characters, guys. Like, this is so easy to suddenly get, and it's not like this is so revolutionary, but I've been doing this for 8 years, and it took me this long to be like, here's a better way to create documentation. But I think that helps because the separation between the back end and whatever the comp was, people are like, well, I don't know what this does. So I think that helps. Okay. Another scenario is like we build all this beautiful stuff and then the client doesn't use it. You're like, why aren't you using this like 70% of the functionality that we built for you? And I think the reason is that sometimes people, you kind of have to be brave with Drupal and like be willing to click a lot of buttons and hit save 400 times to like see what all the options are. So what if we did documentation where you break out little things like this where this says, okay, like pick the position of the overlay and it's left or right, and then it just shows you. And so suddenly you're like, and you guys, this takes a little while, but this is a slightly faster way of doing it. I just did it in Google Docs. So it's not like so high fidelity, and I think it does provide a lot of value. So suddenly they start to understand all of these options, or even something like this where it says, hey, this column can be 4 columns or 3 columns, and it just shows like how wide these things are depending on which variable you pick. Same thing, this one I think you guys will really relate to. Same thing with even something as like minute as your WYSIWYG. Like this WYSIWYG says H3, H3 light, H3 underline, and H3 purple. Now, if you're like new to a company, you're like, well, I don't know, like what's the difference and why would I use one? And then you'll notice here I put ignore H3 light. Like that got put in there because it's relevant on some other page, but in this particular template, it's not relevant. And that happens, as you guys all know, when you build a Drupal site, you're like, here's the global blah-de-blah, let's like apply it to everything and it's done on time, on budget, but like, but then it's like booby-trapped on the back end for the poor admin, you know, they're like, what's this thing? So again, I feel for my clients, you know, because this is their reality. So, but you can do this level of detail, and this is like honestly not that fun to do, but I think it helps them. Are we okay on time? Good. No. We're almost done, but like another scenario is the client asks you to build something that already exists on their site. How many of you guys have had this experience? Quite a few of you. Yeah, it's super common. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to share a really cool story about this. So I worked with a client in this last year, and you know she was involved in strategy, but she was the CMO, and then she had a project lead. And she calls me one day and says like, "Hey Nika, can we implement XYZ?" And I was like, "Man, we already built that." I'm like, "Can we just can you just screen share with me for a second?" I'm like, "Let me show you how to use your website." And she said, "Sure." And I showed her how to use the slice template with like the new Drupal 8 ECK edit screen. And you guys, she says to me, she's like, "Oh, that's it? That's so easy." She goes that night and starts adminning the whole site, like CMO, which to me, like, I just wanted to like reach out and give this woman a hug because there's so many CMOs I know, like I said, are pointers, they're not doers. And to have someone who's like, does it, and then on a leadership level, she says, "Nika, that was great, can you train my whole team?" And of course they had already been trained, but this was the thing I was mentioning earlier. It's like, you have to train them again. Like, when we sell projects, we're like, you get 5 hours of training, and then you're like, we did it, we're done. You know, but the reality is that when we build these more complicated solutions, like check in with people, be like, "Hey man, I know we trained you, but like, are you getting it? Let's do it again. Let's train more of your team. Let's like touch base again." Because we trained their project lead, but she didn't in turn train their team. Or even if she did, people were like not paying attention. But you know, I did that twice, and it really definitely helped. And they did still struggle with some people who were on the team who are like authoring the content and who weren't design thinkers. Like that can still be a stumbling block, but it dramatically made a difference. And so I want to share a couple high-level takeaways. Like, what are some of those key things that will help, you know, the slice template work? And one of them is, like I was mentioning, this woman is if you have a leader at the top who gets it, that will make all the difference in the world. And the leader doesn't have to have a C-level title. It can just be the project lead. It can be anyone who's just like, I am more or less in charge of this website and I got this, and like I understand and I'll make sure other people understand. That will determine the success. Another thing is that when the clients start putting the content on the site, check in with them. Be like, hey, that looks bad. You're doing it wrong, in a loving way. You know, like, but they'll appreciate it. You know, it's like, because because like I said, the slice template is hard. They're going to be learning a new way of thinking about creating content. And if my team of like superstars struggles with it, like they're going to struggle too, and that is all okay. And they will learn these skills, but just like, you know, you can help course correct them along the way so they start to like get it. And then they will say this, it's really powerful once you do get it. So just a quick recap of how we as the practitioners can set these guys up for success. Tell them on day one, you guys, like if you're going to create this for them, that they're going to need to give themselves 3 weeks. And maybe with paragraphs, I don't know, it might be like a little bit easier, but I just think that modular thing, yeah, like I've talked, yeah, I think it's the same no matter what. Review their content. You know, even if you see on the dev site that they're messing it up, just like ping them and be like, hey man, is that final? You know, maybe you forgot this is the right way to use the template. Train them more than once. On that note, you can also consider doing video tutorials. I did this with YMCA where I gave them that like more verbose documentation, and then I made these little vignettes for sort of like each little piece of the more complex templates. So they didn't have to watch a 20-minute video about how to do the whole template. But if they're like, how do I add like node-related people again? It's like that little thing is a 3-minute video that they can just reference. And they're not that hard to make. And probably less painful than doing the Google Docs, quite honestly. And then if you can get your client to pay for it, do the high fidelity documentation. I mean, I'm going to make an assumption that everyone does some level of documentation. But depending on the project, I mean, I guarantee you most people would always want more. And it's hard. I will point out that we work in the internet where this stuff changes constantly, and like it is a moving target. I advocate for that reason for Google Docs, but when you work with like a larger corporation like the one I mentioned initially, they can't use Google Docs. You know, they need like the PDF that's kind of more rigid, but they also have a little bit of a bigger budget. So that's it. I think with those tips, you know, that can kind of help those folks, and that's pretty much it.
We're at time, but the next one doesn't start till 2:30. So,
do you guys have questions?
I was going to add one thing on the training. Is timing is everything too, because if you do training and then they don't actually start, they're not ready to add content, and weeks go by, they've forgotten everything.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
We have a similar system, but not quite the same thing. A couple things that have worked for us is having a listserv in the company that people can help each other.
Oh, that's smart.
And also we do.
On the client side.
On the client side.
That's great. Yeah.
So a lot of our people help each other now. We don't actually intervene.
Smart.
And then secondly, we just have like calls where people call in and ask stuff. So rather than having a specific training thing,
nice.
Having just more of a conversation.
Nice. That actually reminds me, I had one other client, this was Stanford Libraries, who had probably one of the more complicated content creation situations ever, where they had to train upwards of like 70 non-tech content authors on their system, and they created monthly trainings where they would just sort of like, they embrace the fact that training is an ongoing thing. It's not something you do once, you just kind of like keep doing it. Other comments or questions about any of this stuff?
Have you, regarding paragraphs and like the slide where you showed where they were collapsed, do you ever have issues where clients are like, I know the word that I need to change and I can't find it, so I have to go in and open all of them, and so I can do a Control F to find it?
Yeah, on the admin of the paragraphs, I mean, maybe other people have other opinions. I feel like there's no one's happy with that. There's no like right answer. There's like a drawback to each one of them, and like that is one. Like what I like to do actually is give them a little edit link on the front end side, so they're only editing the paragraph that they
You can do that?
You can make it happen. Yeah, with code. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So like
I was hoping it was a checkbox.
No, maybe that's in the future. And it's not always like great, but that helps. But it's also really overwhelming to have everything open all at once. So I don't know, it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think like there are different like visual cues because it'll tell you like I don't know about paragraphs, but on the ECK one it'll say like, oh, it's a 2-column, 1-column, so it'll say that on one side and then it'll say the name on the other side.
We started surfacing the title field of every, we call them bands, the same thing. And
Sure.
instead of slices, and we'll just surface like a useful piece of information so they can scan it quickly and find it. Because otherwise, they couldn't identify by the name of the template. They were like, I'm looking for somebody's name that I need to change. And
Yeah.
so,
Got it.
People in our office are just like, they just go into the forms, just like find in the browser like the text
Right.
in like the giant form because
They keep it open.
all the paragraphs are expanded. So
Yeah, they keep it expanded.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to have a default like set of slices that appear on a page in the system? Like, so if they started to view whatever page, like they had like a hero and a main text or something.
The simplest way to do that would just be to like create like a basic one that's like a test template, leave it unpublished, and then you would just clone it using editing clone. You could probably like build something more sophisticated, but that's the way I would do it. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions or comments? Thank you guys so much for coming down.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Oh, and you can't really see it, but Zakiya